Are you new to the world of e-bikes and want to replace your drive components for the first time but don't know how to do it? In this video, we'll walk you through a complete step-by-step guide covering all the key tasks you need to carry out to keep your e-bike in top shape. We'll also show you how to select the exact replacement parts you need using our new wear kits designed to make maintenance easier than ever. Before we begin, we first need to figure out when is actually the right time to replace those parts. Now let's start by taking a look at the chain, because to determine the actual level of wear on your bike's chain, you'll be needing a chain wear indicator much like this one. A wear indicator like this usually has two sides. Here we've got a slightly smaller one for minor wear and a larger gap for larger, more noticeable wear. Now what you're going to do first is to position carefully the narrower side, marked here with 0.75, onto the chain and then check whether or not it fits into this particular chain. If that's the case, we already have an initial sign of wear, and in that case it would actually be necessary to replace the chain. If the other side even fits into your electric bike chain, which is not the case here, then it's definitely high time to replace the chain, because at that point it means that it's already extremely worn. If you can insert this gauge between your chain links without resistance, then it's definitely time to replace the chain. But when is the right time to replace the chainring and the cassette? Here's our recommendation. If the smaller side of the chain gauge fits in, as is the case here, you can replace the chain once and continue using the same chainring and cassette. If the 0.75 wear limit is reached a second time, then a complete replacement of the chain, cassette and chainring is necessary. If you're at the larger 1.0 spacing on the chain gauge, then we recommend replacing the entire drivetrain, as you'll see it demonstrated in the video, including how to deal with the issues regarding the chainring, cassette and chain. If you decide to replace only the chain for now, with some cassettes, you can also replace just the smallest sprockets on your chain. These are the sprockets that will typically experience the most wear on an electric bike, and this way you can manage to slightly reduce wear for a bit longer before eventually replacing the entire cassette from top to bottom. As mentioned, this is just our personal recommendation for e-bike beginners. Depending on how you use your electric bike, what weather conditions it might be exposed to, and what loads you usually use it under, this can of course vary, and you can only replace individual parts. This is simply our recommendation for keeping your e-bike drivetrain running perfectly. Right now you're probably asking yourself, what tools do you need if you want to replace the drivetrain on your electric bike? Of course, the previously mentioned chain wear indicator is an important tool here, as it was showcased. But we also typically need hex keys, which we can use, for example, to remove the chainring if necessary. We also need a cassette remover, a crank puller, and a chain riveter that allows you to shorten the chain. We will also need a chain whip to remove the cassette. In addition to that, having a good pair of pliers, such as those for opening and closing the chain link, are also very much recommended. And for some chain rings that aren't secured with 2 hex bolts, we also need a very handy chainring nut wrench to hold the chainring bolt in place. You will also be needing a lock ring tool, which you can use to loosen the lock ring from the chainring, and for that you usually need a 1/4 inch ratchet drive to attach it, or you can use this special puller from our online shop. You can also use a 24mm open-end wrench to loosen the lock ring on the chainring of your electric bike. Another personal recommendation of mine is to wear gloves, because if a chain has a few thousand kilometers on it, it's usually pretty greasy to handle. I like to use simple gloves to protect my delicate office worker hands from all that dirty stuff, and a bit of all-purpose assembly grease is always useful for lubricating certain parts before installation. All of these reliable tools that I've shown you here are of course available in our online shop and can be delivered straight to your home. For anyone who regularly rides their e-bike, you will soon find out that these are essential items because it allows you to replace your drivetrain yourself. It's often worn out on e-bikes, especially with motors that are set on their full power modes, delivering 85+ Nm. In such cases, a drivetrain replacement is necessary every few thousand kilometers. If you invest in it once, you'll save yourself workshop visits. Instead, whenever you want, you can just do it yourself and always stay mobile with your e-bike. If you want to renew your drivetrain, what parts do you need? I've already mentioned it several times before. Of course, you need a new compatible chainring, we need a new compatible cassette, and also an electric bike chain that matches your shifting system as well as the components. All parts depend on what kind of shifting system or drivetrain you have installed. Do you have a Shimano, a SRAM, a Shimano Dior, a Shimano Link Glide? What gear ratios does your cassette have? How many teeth do you have? And also, which e-bike motor do you have installed? Possibly to determine which chainring to mount. These are all very crucial questions that you need to answer before ordering drivetrain components. So that you don't have to answer so many questions, we at EBIKE24 have designed ready-made wear part kits. With these, you only need to select your motor and shifting system, and then all the parts, chain, cassette, chainring, will quickly be delivered to your home, ready to use. If you want to use one of these wear part kits, you really only need to find out 3 key things, which you can easily look up in your spec book or read directly from your e-bike. First, of course, is which e-bike drive system, that is, which motor is installed on your bike. In this case, it's a Bosch Performance Line CX of the 4th generation. Second, we need to find out what kind of chainring is installed at the front. In this case, it's a 36-tooth chainring. Simply count the number of teeth, or most of the time it's also printed on the front or back of the chainring. And it has a 4-bolt spider mount, meaning the chainring is mounted in a separate holder on the motor. There is also the possibility that it is mounted directly onto the motor shaft using a direct mount interface. Now we just need to take a look at the derailleur and the cassette right around this part here. On the derailleur you will usually find a label indicating which group it actually belongs to. So Shimano or SRAM is usually printed clearly on it or mentioned in the manual that came with your e-bike. In this case we have a Shimano 12-speed chain drivetrain. You can also simply count the number of teeth. SLX version, part of the SLX group, is also indicated on the derailleur. Now let's take another look at the cassette. What we are trying to find out here is just how many teeth does the largest sprocket actually have. That is usually written somewhere as well, or you can quickly count them again to see how many there are. And now that you know about the largest sprocket, you can simply add the right wear and tear set to your cart in just a few minutes in our shop and place an order. So what we'll be needing for this electric bicycle is a wear and tear parts set for the reliable Bosch Gen 4 or even the Gen 5 motor for the Shimano SLX group with the large cassette featuring a maximum of 51 teeth, as well as a spider mount chainring with a total of 36 teeth. When it comes to changing the drivetrain, we will specifically have to focus on the chainring. The first step here is to carefully detach the crank from your axle. To do this step here, we first remove the bolt located in the center of the crank and then gently pull off the entire crank using the tool that is aptly named a crank puller. There are 2 options for this process. Ones with a pre-installed handle or individual socket attachments that you can also operate with an open-end wrench. We simply screw these into the internal thread of the crank and then turn them clockwise using the appropriate tool or lever until the crank detaches from the axle, as is demonstrated in the clip you're now seeing. Make sure that a washer, which may have been under the crank bolt, hasn't gotten stuck inside and failed to come out, because if it has, it'll make it impossible for us to remove the crank. Once you've removed the crank and set it aside safely, the next step is to take care of the lock ring. For that, you'll need the appropriate lock ring tool, here, specifically for the Bosch Gen 4 motor. This is a standard lock ring size that's also used by many others, like Bros or Yamaha. So you will only really need one tool for various electric bikes as well. What's special here is that it's a left-hand thread. In other words, this allows us to loosen it by turning it clockwise from the chainring side. You'll notice that when we try to do that, the problem is that the rear wheel normally turns along with it. Here's a tip for you to keep in mind. Just use the existing chain, apply the rear brake to stop the rear wheel, and now you have the counterforce needed to loosen the lock ring from the axle on your motor. After we've loosened the lock ring, I recommend that you first remove the chain before continuing. In this case, we're going to be using a master link plier, since we have a chain with a master link. First, we have to locate the master link on your chain. You can recognize the master link by the fact that the hole or pin sits in a slightly elongated slot. Now we can position the plier for the link on it, and then we can easily open the link in the correct direction. Make sure to safely set aside the chain after removing it, because you'll actually need it again later. Now you can easily remove the lock ring from the axle by hand and also take off the chainring. In this case, this does include the spider. You may also need to remove a chain guide for this or get it out of the way. And now the chainring is already removed in no time. If, as in this case, you don't have a direct mount chainring but one mounted with a spider, we now simply need to detach the current chainring from said spider. To do this, just remove the chainring bolts using the appropriate tool. Here we have the chainring bolts that are counter-held using 2 hex keys. But there are also versions that, as mentioned at the beginning, require a chainring tool. In that case, you have a hex key on one side and the special tool on the other, which can then be inserted into the nut. When mounting the new chainring onto your spider, make sure that the correct side is facing outward. This is usually the side that has the manufacturer's logo on it, like here. Also, please ensure that the chainring splines mesh properly with the spider so that it can no longer twist. Now simply fasten it using the previous chainring bolts that you should still have at hand. After you have completed that step, or if you have simply chosen to go with a chainring with a direct mount installation to avoid doing all that, we are now ready to place the new chainring onto the motor shaft. Of course, take the opportunity to clean things up a bit beforehand. Use a cloth and a bit of cleaning solution to remove any coarse dirt and make sure to pre-treat everything with a little assembly paste. That way, it'll be easier to remove next time. First, place the chainring on it. Now put on the lock ring. Make sure not to forget the small rubber seal here if it was included with your setup. If you have a Bosch, then it should be included. You can also buy it separately if it has been damaged. Then screw the lock ring on hand tight at first and afterwards tighten it properly using the appropriate lock ring tool, applying the number of Newton meters specified on the lock ring. Now return your electric bicycle to its original state, which is to say, reinstall the chain guide as well as the crank. To do this, place the crank on and secure it using the corresponding bolt you set aside earlier. The recommended torque is usually printed directly on the crank bolt. Are you part of the 97% of our viewership who haven't yet subscribed to our channel? Then it's best to change that right now by clicking the subscribe button and by also clicking on the bell icon so you won't miss any exciting news and tips about electric bikes. Now let's get back to our tutorial on how to replace the drivetrain. For this next step, we will have to focus on the cassette. The thing we've got to do here is to carefully remove the rear wheel. In this case, it's an e-bike with a through axle, so unscrew it and take out the rear wheel. Now, as you can see here, we can insert the cassette remover into that rear gear cluster, and this is where we are dealing with the problem where we need to rotate the cassette in the freewheel direction, which of course doesn't work. That's why we're simply going to take the chain whip, then place it on the sprocket cluster, and now we're going to use it to apply counter pressure in order to easily loosen the cassette or the cassette's lock ring in the correct manner. Now remove the old cassette from the free hub body, including the individual sprockets if that applies to your actual setup. Next, you'll first have to clean the free hub a bit again, carefully and thoroughly, if you find that any dirt or grease has gotten on it. Then gently pre-treat the whole thing with some assembly paste and properly install the new cassette. Now you can finally mount the new sprocket cluster. Make sure not to mix up the correct order of the individual sprockets, if that applies to your setup, and don't lose the spacers in between. You actually can't install them incorrectly, realistically speaking, because the splines determine exactly how the sprockets must be mounted onto the free hub body. Now carefully tighten the cassette once more using the lock ring and the cassette tool. Here too you'll be able to find the recommended torque that is properly printed on the lock ring. Now we can reinstall the rear wheel and the cassette replacement is complete. In the final step, we just need to couple the new chain to your e-bike. To do that, we first need to adjust it to the correct length. Our wear and tear kit always includes a chain with 126 links. That should be enough for the vast majority of e-bikes. Only if you have longtails or cargo bikes, then you will actually need a longer chain. For mountain bikes and trekking bikes, the 126 links are completely sufficient. To shorten the chain, we now use your old chain as a sort of reference template, and then you will have to lay them side by side to determine where we need to break the new chain using the tool specifically made for this. But that being said, here's something that you should really keep in mind. This method only works if you haven't changed your gear setup, meaning you're still using the same number of teeth on the front and rear, because only then can you use your old chain as a reliable template. Once you've found the correct link, which is essential for the process, you can securely clamp it in the chain tool. By carefully turning the pin screw, let's call it that for simplicity's sake, you push the pin outwards. This action is necessary to effectively shorten the chain to the length that you're looking for. In the next step, we simply and carefully thread the chain through the chain guide on your e-bike and connect it using, in this case, a master link. For this, we can also use the chain link pliers, as they have the option to close the master link easily and securely, ensuring everything is in place. So this is where we connect the two ends of the chain with the master link, and then we use the chain pliers to snap it together with a nice firm tug. And with that, we've already completed the replacement of the most common wear parts. Your electric bike is ready for new adventures again, and in my opinion, it's relatively easy to do by using our wear parts kit. With a bit of DIY skill, anyone should be able to manage to do this at home. Of course, if you want to upgrade anything, you'll need to do a bit of research to find out which components are compatible with each other. If you still got questions, don't hesitate to write them in the comments. We'll be happy to answer them. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss out on more tips and news for e-bikes.